you for coming. I know people came from far and wide, so welcome. Welcome to St. John's College in Oxford and to this ISGAP seminar on curriculum development of contemporary anti-Semitism. My name is Charles. I'm the director of ISGAP. This is the third year we're doing this, so we're pleased that we're all here again. I want to introduce my colleague Michelle Whiteman, Carlton Long, and Ira Guberman, who I think you've all been in contact with. And they have a few brief announcements, and then we're going to start the program.
No brief announcements, really just greetings, welcome. So nice to see, so nice to put faces to the names and corresponding with a few of you. So looking forward to getting to know you throughout these next 2 weeks. And if you have any issues or questions, you can just speak to me or Ira. And wear your lanyard so we can all get to know each other, and that's it for now. Enjoy.
Great. Hello, everybody. We've been in correspondence about your syllabi. We'll stay in correspondence about your syllabi. I'm excited to be a part of ISGAP once again. Charles and I go all the way back, and we'll talk about that to our days here at Oxford a million years ago. My wife says that I've never seen a microphone that I didn't like. So that means I have to make sure I reel it in and not talk as much. But I'm looking forward to being a support to you, and that's what it's all about in terms of the curriculum piece, so that you can be a support to others. So welcome, and if you have any questions or comments, I'm right here, okay?
Okay. So, welcome. So I'm going to give a brief introduction on why we're all here. And basically this is the third year that we're doing this. And we started this project of curriculum development, of dealing with contemporary anti-Semitism, because I'm sure, as many of you know, the issue of contemporary anti-Semitism has not been adequately addressed or perhaps even ignored. I would even argue it's a taboo subject, particularly in the academy, and particularly among the elite liberal intellectuals. This is something that has been silenced. The history of anti-Semitism is fine. It became, I would argue, an acceptable part of the academic environment in which we're functioning. So very briefly, and I'm going to get into this tomorrow, we're going to discuss 3 phases of anti-Semitism, or anti-Semitisms with an S. The first phase was religious-based, and I think I'll just be very brief this evening. It was religious-based, and the quintessential other was the Jew. And particularly during the European Christian periods of anti-Semitism, the Jew was the quintessential other, blinded by evil by not accepting the teachings of the Gospels and of Christ. And not only was the Jew perceived as being incapable of having redemption because of the blindness of evil interfering with their acceptance of the Christian notion of the Messiah, the thing about anti-Semitism that makes it so unique, and we'll get into it, is that anti-Semitism is inherently genocidal. Because people believe, Christians believe, at various points in time, the teachings of the gospel was not only was the Jew unable to have redemption, but the world would only be redeemed if the Jew would be able to accept the teachings of the gospels. So the Jew was holding back the redemption of the entire world. When the lens shifted from religion, and shifted from religion as a dominant worldview, and shifted to notions of race and nationalism, the Jew was perceived as the race that was poisoning the purity of the white Aryan race, and was poisoning the purity of the nation. So unlike during the religious period where the Jew had the option to convert or be exiled or killed, in the period of grace, the option of conversion doesn't exist, because these notions of race, biology, and ethnicity were fixed in place. So there was no option. So the Jew had to be either exiled or killed. And I would argue, and we'll go into it in more detail during the week, that this sort of notion of racist forms of anti-Semitism or extreme nationalist forms of anti-Semitism culminates in the Holocaust. And we'll go unpack this in more detail. Today, among liberal intellectuals in the West, these forms of Christian and racist anti-Semitism, I think, are basically a thing, I won't say a thing of the past, but they're certainly not dominant views. In some countries, we're beginning to witness the rise of nationalism. We have some colleagues from Hungary and some other places where these issues are maybe coming up again. The old forms of anti-Semitism are re-emerging. We'll get into it. Today's anti-Semitism is an attack on who Jews are as a people. It's an attack on Jewish people. And I would submit to you that not only is it a taboo to deal with this form of anti-Semitism, it's actually your past. The more people are anti-Jewish peoplehood, the more acceptable you are in the academy, the more acceptable you are in the media of record. So in other words, the demonization who Jews are as a people is the new fashionable, acceptable, tolerated, I would say even promoted form of anti-Semitism. So we cannot bash the Jew based on race, we cannot bash the Jew based on his or her religion, but bash the notion of who Jews are as a people, demonize, delegitimize the fact that Israel exists or that Jews have some sort of affinity to the land of Israel. So we have here in the West, in the sort of postmodern moment, the demonization of Jewish notions of identity, of belonging, and of its connection to the Holy Land of Israel, to the land, to Jerusalem, etc. So we also will deal with the fact that there's a rise of radical political Islam. And if we speak about radical or political Islam, we are not speaking about Islam in this room. We are not speaking about Muslims. We're speaking about a very specific form of ideology of political Islam that aims to impose a certain form, a narrow form of Islam on society and do away with notions of democracy, to do away with notions of citizenship. And this form of anti-Semitism is or anti-Semitism is at the core of this reactionary social movement. They have taken through the Muslim Brotherhood the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is the lie that emerges in Russia or France, depending on your view of the history of the protocols. It lay the foundation, as Elie Wiesel said, that the Holocaust did not begin with railroad tracks and crematoriums. The Holocaust begins with words and with ideas. And the words and the ideas of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was exported or imported and brought into Egypt and plays a key role in the formation of the Muslim Brotherhood. And you can see the protocols not only in the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, but in the teachings and the writing and the covenants of Hamas and all the offshoots, the various offshoots of radical political Islam. So European, fascist, Nazi, anti-Semitism is at the core of this reactionary religious social movement in the Islamic world, and yet in the academy, in the liberal West, to be critical of this ideology, of this movement, has been a taboo, because in this sort of postmodern age, who are we in the West to critique a narrative coming out from a place that was once colonized by us racists in the West? So there is this sort of intellectual, ideological, philosophical quicksand that we're in. So we want to condemn, perhaps, anti-Semitism. We want to condemn the sexism and the homophobia and the anti-religious behaviors, or the targeting of Christians and Coptics and other religious minorities and Muslims who are moderate and who don't want to be living under this sort of regime of puritanical notions of Islam. But to speak about it in our institutions is then being critical of those who were once colonized. It's being advocates for the Zionist regime, right, which is racist and apartheid and Nazi-led. So we're sort of stuck. And our inability as intellectuals to engage this issue in serious, high-caliber academic research, the silencing of this conversation that we're going to have for 2 weeks, I would argue has paid a price. And Carlton and Michelle and Ira, when we come here, we've been coming here now for 3 years, and every year it seems to be getting more and more serious. The first year we were very concerned with Iran. We were very concerned about the spread of terror in the Middle East and in Europe, in France. We have some people from France here. And how I think the quintessential embodiment of this sort of taboo subject was when Mr. Koulibaly goes into a supermarket in Paris on the eve of Shabbat, and he goes into a kosher supermarket and he asks his victims if they were Jewish, and when they say they were Jewish, 4 men. Mr. Koulibaly, who was a member of and carrying out a mission, a jihadist mission of this ideology, to kill Jews, because this is the mission of the ideology, and shot them dead in point-blank range on the eve of Shabbat in a Jewish kosher supermarket in Paris, when the American administration cannot bring itself to say that that was an anti-Semitic act, that it was some random act in a deli. When that happens, and when intellectuals are not engaging the issue, when there are no courses on contemporary issues of anti-Semitism in the university, that's when we started this. And something is wrong. And I think the role, as Henri Bernard Levy often says, the role of the intellectual is to shine light where there is darkness, regardless of the prevailing view. And I think that the charge that we have is to really engage these issues. This is going to be a space where people should feel free and empowered to speak, to be critical, to ask tough questions, to debate, to go into the pubs and dinners at night and argue with each other, but with a sense of respect and a sense for searching for truth and for trying to grapple with and understand these highly charged and complicated issues, and issues that are of profound importance. And we'll get into this in more detail, but when we come here, and we were worried about Iran 3 years ago, we still are very worried about Iran, a regime that is ideologically obligated to exterminate Jews, when the focus has been on the demonization of Israel and Israeli human rights and its apartheid system and its Nazi system. I would argue the only democracy in the region, but where intellectuals demonize the Jewish homeland and the notion of the Jewish homeland and focus on it, and we do not pay attention to what's happening in countries in the region or around the world. It's this anti-Semitism that negates our ability or limits our ability to really engage the issues in other parts of the world. And I think very clearly how this ideology is running rampant as we speak in places like Syria and Iraq and other parts of the world, where the death toll of what I would call, and other colleagues call, an ongoing genocide of 550 to 600,000 dead people, 12 to 14 million refugees. And yet, our intellectuals, are we engaging these issues? This is what students are engaged in. Are people protesting the massacres of innocent people in the region? Or is it the focus on the Jew? Well, other things are taking place. This was the puppeteer, focus on the Jew while we take power over here. So these are the type of questions and issues that we're going to unpack from all sorts of perspectives. I think we have a very rich curriculum. Amazing speakers will be coming in. And this is, as I said, a space where we have to discuss, debate, and even argue with respect. We have 56 graduates. This is the new group will bring us to almost 90 graduates in 2 weeks to this program. About 92 or 93% of our graduates are actually teaching courses for credit at their home university. So we're beginning to create a network of scholars from different disciplines who take these issues seriously. So this is also sort of become part of a small group of people who are engaging these issues from all sorts of perspectives. Professor Mark, welcome.
Maybe there's a seat over here.
So we're going to start tonight. Pardon? Good idea. So before we continue with the program, as Michelle pointed out, I think it's important that we can go around the room and briefly introduce ourselves to each other just for a moment or two, your names, where you're from, maybe why you came here to do this, and just a bit about yourself. So we're going to start with Professor Amsel.
Well, first of all, I want to thank those who organized it, and thank them even more for including me. So thank you very much. I work at Columbia University in New York. I'm a psychiatrist with a focus on trauma. So the area of our expertise is the effects of trauma on people, especially 9/11. For example, we have a research project in which we have 1,000 kids who were present at 9/11, and we follow them. And believe it or not, even 15 years later, that group of kids who were at 9/11 were in the exact region, have more psychiatric problems. They make decisions differently. We have documented the long-term effects on terrorism on children. So this is kids who were exposed from age 0 to 18. And so anybody into that, and I think that I'm trying, as I did very clumsily in my syllabus thing, to combine the psychology of terrorism with the understanding of anti-Semitism. As far as my name is concerned, I thought about this for a while. When I was a kid, everyone called me by my Yiddish name, which is Laser. I rarely get a chance to use that name. I think at this conference I'm going to use my Yiddish name, which is Laser Wolf.
Yes, my name is Ulrike Marz, and I come from Rostock, Germany, and I'm a sociologist, and I am working at the chair of sociological theories, and I have written my doctoral thesis on Iranian antisemitism, and yes, I'm very glad and happy to be here, and yes, it's my first experience in an international discussion, and I have to apologize for all the mistakes I will make in the next years because my English is not so good.
So first of all, you don't have to apologize. I think the great thing about this room is everybody's from all over the world, and people will speak English as a second. Many of us will speak English as a second language. So no need to apologize.
I wanted to check what I wrote down there. I think it's accurate. My name is Matthias Hagedorni. I'm from Germany as well. I'm a lecturer of the Free University of Berlin in political science, but actually I'm a philosopher and a historian. I studied in the University of Bonn, and my field of interest is right now the New Right in Germany, the anti-liberal and anti-Semitic ideology of the New Right, but I worked for 2 years for the Mid-East Freedom Forum of Berlin, and we built up a network, educational network to combat Israel-related anti-Semitism, and this is as well one of my fields of interest for years.
Hello, my name is Seth Armas. I'm a professor of history at St. Joseph's College in New York. I'm a French historian by training, 20th century France, and I wrote a book on French anti-Americanism intellectuals moving from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And in writing that, I became very interested in the clear convergence between anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism. In that book, I specifically looked at the post-war Marxist, as I say, like Marxists, broadly speaking, intellectuals and their anti-Americanism, and I traced, which is not difficult to do, the anti-Americanism of the 40s and 50s to a kind of interwar cohort who were not Marxists. In any event, the sort of left-right convergence inspired a general interest in the way that looks at anti-Semitism as well. And as I think I mentioned, I have a kind of a sub-interest in hyper-modern Michel Houellebecq and French literature in the post-war era. Literary dystopias and utopias. Yes?
I am a French ethnologist specializing in the study of African Judaism, its diverse cultures, historical environments, religious beliefs and practices, and in the study of their particular Jewish identities. From the 2000 I have carried out research that provides scientific data on a dozen of ethnic groups in the African continent. I mean Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Cameroon, Congo, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, Madagascar, and other countries who claim to have a connection to ancient Israel and at various levels identify themselves as the physical descendants of the lost tribes. Estimates vary. They may number in the hundreds of thousands. The aim of my research is to examine the multiple sources and reasons for the shaping of modern African philo-Semitism in a world marked by globalization, ecological crisis, and ethnic and religious conflicts. The development of African philo-Semitism is the outcome of a long historical anthropological process intertwining religious, cultural, and political strands, and I have examined and have tried to examine all those elements.
My name is Tiara Selby. I am an undergraduate at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. My professor had came to the Summer Institute last summer, and he taught me the course on anti-Semitism, and I found it really interesting. So here I am.
Hello, my name is Vera Zhuborova. I came from Slovakia. I'm a political scientist, background, but more or less I'm involved in let's call it political activism, and we are trying run in Trnava. We call it the base of fascists there. It's a sad story. And in these three NGOs, they are focusing on combating the right, far extremist right, and developing programs, social programs, study programs that are mainly based on, let's call it, educating the youngest generation, because this is something that we completely forgot in Slovakia, and it's overrun us last year when we had fascists in the parliament. So this is something that we are dealing now. And why I'm here, it's something that my partner and I now I'm building a new policy institute that we will try to focus on extremism and far right and the younger generation. So this is something that I'm looking forward to give me a robust theoretical background for these activities.
Hello, my name is Daniel Rona. I'm from Budapest, Hungary. Thank you for inviting me. I'm an assistant professor at Corvinus University of Budapest. I teach research methodology, public opinion polling. I wrote my doctoral dissertation about far-right politics, far-right parties in Europe, and in particular Jobbik, the Hungarian far-right party. And I also work for a Jewish NGO. It's called Action and Protection Foundation. We monitor anti-Semitic activities. We conduct surveys about anti-Semitism in Hungary. So I think there are many ways I could connect to this research seminar. I'm very happy to be here.
Hi, how are you, everybody? I have to say thank you twice, because this is an opportunity that I was waiting for many, many years. I was with my late wife working independently in this subject, but I never had the opportunity to belong to a group and to connect my experience in teaching, my years of teaching, with a research group of this caliber. Although by profession I'm physician and psychologist, I always took the topic of anti-Semitism very seriously, and I worked for many years in the American Psychological Association, teaching and trying to change behaviors, to change beliefs, and other elements that determine this type of behavior in anti-Semitism. And as a perfect package, together with Professor Small, recently we coordinated in our synagogue, an Orthodox synagogue in Miami, a partnership to bring all the knowledge from ISGAP to lay population, to spread out this information through our own communities, and the possibilities also to make contacts with universities in Latin America, which I'm familiar to. Thank you.
So my name is Jason O'Connor. I was born in South Africa, raised in Israel. I'm a high school teacher as one of the PhD student in comparative studies at Florida Atlantic University. My main focus is on examining post-communist, post-Jewish relations and the relationship and the historiography of the Holocaust in Poland, Lithuania, and Belarus, on the development of this relationship and the attempts to erase and reshape history, or what is taught, what is not taught in that area.
My name is Tamás Kovács. I come from Hungary like Tony. I work for Hungarian National Archive. I'm a senior historian and vice head one of no-name department. My special field, Hungarian Holocaust and far-right parties during the Horthy era, and the Holocaust and Hungarian gendarmerie and police activities.
My name is Russell Lemons. I teach at Jacksonville State University. I'm a historian, and actually I'm trained as a 20th century European historian, specifically an historian of Germany. And over the course of the last several years, I've taught a course on the history of modern Israel, and students are fascinated with that particular subject. Even in Alabama, they're fascinated with that particular subject. And when they ask questions, I can tell them a great deal about the history of anti-Semitism, but I discovered I know remarkably little about contemporary anti-Semitism. So I'm here primarily to learn more about contemporary anti-Semitism. I'm obviously especially interested in the links between the anti-Semitism of the Third Reich and contemporary anti-Semitism in the Middle East.
Hi, I'm Heather Mann. I'm a PhD student here at the University of Oxford, so probably have had to travel the east. Before starting my PhD, I was a high school teacher in history, and now I study the history of Holocaust education in France, Austria, and Britain. And I guess the reason why I decided to enroll on the program here is it has surprised me how infrequently anti-Semitism comes up in high school Holocaust education.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Rome, currently a resident of the city of Nashville in the great state of Tennessee, United States. I moved there 3 weeks ago. So, yes, new to me, but I'm a student at the University of Missouri, a PhD student, and I'm focusing on educational leadership and policy analysis, specifically with emphasis on underachievement of students in urban schools and American schools. And I think there is a strong connection between the issues of race and student underachievement and the issues of anti-Semitism and student underachievement in schools. So I see a great connection. I also have a dear friend who I've worked with for quite some time who speaks glowingly of this project and this program, and so I'm happy to be able to work with Dr. Carlton Long once again and just study more deeply as you the contemporary issues that affect students in schools.
Thank you. My name is Jitka Jurkova. I'm from the Charles University in Prague, the Czech Republic. I've been engaged with the studies of cultural diplomacy for 10 years. For 3 years, I was serving as an advisor for cultural diplomacy to the Embassy of Israel in Prague as well. And during that time, I did become very interested in cultural boycott and the whole the BDS movement, which is a major force in the world of cultural diplomacy today, but obviously very under-researched. And the anti-Semitic context there is a big part of that, so that's why I'm here. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. That's it.
Hi, I'm Dina Lisnansky. I'm from Israel, but I was born in Russia, so I got to feel what anti-Semitism feels like as a little girl. But actually I'm here not because of that. I've been working in Palestinian Media Watch for 7 years, and after that I did my PhD about Islamic Dawah in Europe. And then I found out a lot of interesting things. and got to understand at least a little bit of them. And then after that, I started teaching in two universities, in the Jerusalem University, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and Bar-Ilan University. And most of the courses that I teach deal with radical Islam. And sometimes we deal with anti-Semitism in Islam, but never with contemporary anti-Semitism in Islam. Moreover, I'm here because I feel that every publication that we, as academics, are trying to publish that would have words like anti-Semitism in modern Islam would be unacceptable. And this is why it actually offends me on a bit of a personal level. So, okay, I'm just kidding, okay? Thank you.
Warm greetings to everybody. I'm Navras Afridi from a 200-year-old institution in Kolkata, which was the epicenter of Renaissance Day, Presidency University. I teach an undergraduate course in global Jewish history and a Holocaust-focused postgraduate course. I would prefer to tell you things that aren't mentioned in my biographical profile here. And very briefly, though, I'll start with my family background because it has played a very important role in triggering my interest in anti-Semitism studies. I come from a very mixed background, a multi-faith background. My mother comes from Hindu Sikh parentage. My father was born in a Muslim family, though he decided at a very young age to spend the rest of his life without any religion. So I was raised without any religion and also without any biases or prejudices against any religious community. I was born and raised in a city which is known as a major center of Muslim scholarship. There aren't any Jews there, yet they find frequent mention in the Muslim discourse. And this is what triggered my interest in anti-Semitism, because the mention is almost always negative in nature. I received my entire education right from the primary level to the tertiary level at the in Lucknow. I earned my degrees of BA and PhD from the University of Lucknow. Following that, I've had 4 postdoctoral stints in Israel, Cambridge, and 2 at the University of Sydney. I had been wanting to come to this institute for a couple of years. The very first time when I submitted my application at my home institution, requesting them to give a written assurance that I would be given the opportunity to introduce a course in anti-Semitism studies at the university. My request was refused, it was declined. It was a state institution. I still teach at a state institution, but this was an institution in my home state, Uttar Pradesh, which has also been the hotbed of Muslim politics in South Asia. The institution that I'm currently employed at, it has been extraordinarily generous and kind to me for permitting me to introduce the courses that I have come to introduce there at this institution. And the credit would largely go to the visionary vice chancellor that we have there at that institution, who was also a postdoctoral fellow for a couple of years in Israel. Though she's not a social scientist, she is scholar of life sciences. I'm most grateful to the organizers, in particular to Dr. Small, for giving me the opportunity to participate in this institute. Thank you very much.
My name is Darrell Aaron. I'm a Christian pastor in North Carolina, USA. I try to keep practice and theory married, so I keep one foot in the academy. I teach at Wake Forest Divinity School. It's interesting that you spoke about the elite liberal schools in America, because my son goes to one of the top 3 boarding schools in America, Groton. And he asked me, when I told him I was on my way to Oxford to study anti-Semitism, he said to me, "What's that got to do with you?" not recognizing that it is the oldest form of hatred in the world. And to be a Christian pastor not to engage that is a lack of understanding of who we are as Christians and also people in the world. But also he is headed to probably Columbia or Harvard. He's making that decision hopefully by the time I go back to USA. So even today it's very prevalent and also important to be here today, to be a part of this organization to study anti-Semitism.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Roberts. I'm a political scientist from Virginia. I teach at Virginia State University, where I have the privilege of leading our honors program, which is comprised of more than 400 undergraduates from all disciplines represented at the university. My background is in democratization and international education, where I spent a long period of time. I had the great privilege and pleasure to spend time in Eastern Europe, in South Africa, in some pivotal times in both places. And these things certainly influence who I am. In terms of what I do with the honor students, they connect with that. I want to always encourage, I want to challenge, more than anything, challenge our students to think about questions in ways they never have before. And I think this is why the connection to this institute is so valuable, is that our students will benefit enormously from this perspective. So I appreciate everyone. Appreciate very much the organizers. Thank you.
My name is Femi Fong. I teach African Studies and African Diaspora Studies at Burden College. I've been teaching at Burden now for 8 years. Actually, I'm on my way to Amherst College. I hear somebody mention that these people are also liberal arts colleges early, and I'm sorry I came in late, and I don't know in what particular context that was mentioned. At any rate, I should mention that I've been a part of this institute now for quite some time. I happen to be, and I don't want to be too much away, a very dear friend, I think, of Charles and Carlton and Phyllis. With the exception of Phyllis, who is a mentor of mine, Charles and Carlton and I were friends and graduate students here way back in the mid-1980s. So, and on a very personal note, I've seen how hard Charles has worked to make this institute the wonderful and exciting project that it has become, and even more importantly, to make ISGAP a truly exceptional, inclusive, intellectual forum of progressive thinking. So it's really wonderful to be a part of this group, and just to have that sense of how things have gone over the years. It's always special to do that. I thank Charles very much for inviting me, and Michelle and Ira for including me in this wonderful forum.
My name is Barry Cosman. I'm a professor of public policy and law at Trinity College in Connecticut. You'll hear a lot from me tomorrow, too much probably. This is my third year here, and I endorse everything Fanny said about Charles and ISGAP. It's a wonderful gathering of a great variety of people from different backgrounds. I think it's a wonderful educational setting. So I'm happy to be here.
My name is Rabbi Brackman. I'm a local rabbi in Oxford, so I haven't come very far, very local on my bike. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'd just like to share with you the opening of this tremendous project, this conference. I've known Professor Small for so many years now. In particular, I know the board members, my good friend Professor Laser Wolf Amsel from Columbia, who I bumped into him in Oxford maybe 10, 11 years ago, and he introduced me to Professor Small and now this project, and I just commend the work. We share the aims and the goals of ISGAP as the Rabbi of the Jewish community here, working with the Jewish students, with the university in Oxford and the Brooks University, with the academics and the students. So we work the top down and bottom up, where we try to educate the students that Jewish life is part of the fabric of university life. It's like anything else. It's about enjoying multicultural and history and heritage. And Jewish heritage is very rich and it's open and available and accessible to all students. So we have students from all backgrounds who appreciate and enjoy Jewish life. So it's breaking down boundaries and education. And at the same time, we're embedded with the university community. So as you may have heard, at Oxford there's issues with the Labour Club and Labour Society, where students were accused of anti-Semitism. This was a very grave issue at Oxford. It made world headlines. And we immediately approached the proctors at the university administration. Are they dealing with this adequately? This is a very serious issue. It should not be seen just, as unimportant and it'll just pass over, but it must be dealt with. Are the policies adequate at the university to deal with it? Are there contacts in place for students to approach? So we're very engaged with anti-Semitism and the challenges it poses at the administration level and the student level, on a personal level to the students. And at the same time, the other half is the importance of the joy and pride and positivity of Jewish life on campus, which goes hand in hand with the negativity that we see. Thank you for the great work.
My name is David Zweig. I am in my grandfather's university in Florida, University, and I'm mainly here as a bodyguard for my father.
I'm a historian. I work in the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw. I am a historian specializing in the history of Jews in Poland, in particular immediately after the Holocaust. I focus on life in the ghettos in particular. I had a big project of research and publications of documents from the underground art of the Warsaw ghetto. And right now I'm working on post-war history, on relations between Poles and Jews in displaced persons camps in occupied Germany. And this is where the topic of anti-Semitism and this seminar comes in, and I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I'm Zhuzhia from China, and I'm a senior high school student. I come to the institute with my mother. I have been interested in Jewish history and the Holocaust and anti-Semitism for years, and I have read some books. I asked my mother whether she can take me here, and she said yes. I'm very appreciative, and my English is not very good, but I will try my best to understand your literature and discussion. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Zhang Shiqing from China. I'm now a history professor in the University in National Province. In fact, I have been a university teacher for 22 years. In 1999, in which year my daughter was born, I began to teach Jewish history and culture. And since then, every year about 100 students who listen to me. Until now, more and more Chinese students became interested in Jewish history and culture. And during the year 2004 to 2007, I did my PhD program and finished my thesis in Nanjing University under the supervision of Professor Xixin. And my major was Jewish women in the Middle Ages. And now I'm working on medieval European history, including antisemitism in medieval Europe, especially the Crusades and the Jews. In fact, as you know, or you may not know, in China there used to be a Jewish community in Kaifeng, Shanghai, and Harbin, but there was no anti-Semitism in China. In 2010, I went to Yad Vashem in Israel to attend the seminar on how to teach Holocaust for Asian educators. And before that, I used to study at Bar Ilan University for eight months. I really appreciate this this wonderful chance for me and my daughter to come here to learn and to communicate with so many scholars from all over the world. Thank you very much.
My name is Rana Aziz. I'm an Egyptian journalist and political analyst, and also I'm PhD candidate in University of Rome. And I want to know that I'm happy or not happy because I'm sitting next to my supervisor here. He was me, so he will evaluate me after back to Rome again. So, but yeah, if he looks cool, okay. Anyway. So my thesis goes to be about the issue of political Islam in Europe. But political Islam in Europe is a very sensitive issue and have a different approaches. I'm going to talk about the ideology because as we know nowadays, the ideology is the most important thing is we should focus upon. Because ideology still remain even we defeat militarist groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Maybe newcomers come and use ideology again to create another group under another name and tell us we are here, we were going to do 1, 2, 3. A few days ago I arrived from Washington DC. I there in the Washington Institute because I'm in touch with them, I'm contributors there. They asked me many questions about the future of Europe with Islam. I'm here not against Islam and I shouldn't speak about the religion. I'm respectful of the religion for everybody and everybody has the right to believe in anything he wanted to believe in. But we want to talk about the ideology, the political ideas that using by some groups to achieving political targets, how you can separate between both of them. I have honor to visit Israel last year and delegated of Arab journalists. I've been there in many places, but the most important place I visited is Yad Vashem. I get a lot of information about the suffering of Jewish people during the World War II, but the suffering of Jewish people never stopped because nowadays we have a lot of challenge facing Israel. I'm not Jewish, but I faced this anti-Semitism because after my visit, a lot of journalists, a lot of media is striking me. Said, how you as Egyptian goes to Israel and visit them? I said, what is the wrong to, we should, if I can say that, we should to separate and distinguish between two issues. Israel as a state, Israel as a political issue, and between Jewish people. Jewish people have full right to have safety life everywhere. We can't put them under pressure for political issues and for political crisis, even between Israel or Palestine and other issues. My mission is focused on how we can speak to Arab audience, Arab students about the issue of anti-Semitism, how we can told them that Jewish people are normal people, not like we teach it in our schools before. I don't want to tell some truth here. Maybe next days we can talk widely about that. So I'm here to listen and learn, and I'm very delightful because I'm between all of you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Phyllis Ferguson, and I'm here to help you. I'm a 30-year resident of Oxford. I've been a member of the history faculty and of the social studies faculty. My training is in anthropology and history. And my work has been for 18 years in Africa and for 14 years in this university, and I'm still part of the university in transitional justice. And I work particularly on issues surrounding ethnic difference, racism, and hatred of any sort. I most recently worked for 8 years in Timor-Leste. I served on the Truth Commission there, and I feel I have a lot to contribute to you. but I also want to say that I'm here for you as a reference point about Oxford to help you find your way around Oxford and to enjoy things outside of what's going on in this space. Thank you.
I'm Alessandro Saggioro from Sapienza University. And I'm professor of the history of religions in Sapienza since the last 10 years. And I am an historian of ancient Rome and the relationship between Christians and Rome and pagan religions. And in the last time I have been working about the relation between the Roman Empire, the Christian Roman Empire and other religions. And that's why I was interested in antisemitism, and that's why I'm here today. I wanted to study the past in a longue durée perspective, and that's why I'm interested in this course. And I'm also the director of PhD in History of Europe in Sapienza University, and I think that I have the responsibility to know more about these issues. A good colleague of mine, Andrea, was here last year, and he suggested me to come, and I'm here to be a student, and I'm quite happy about that. I don't want to be the supervisor of planning.
First of all, thank you for the invitation, Dr. Small, and to Michelle for organizing all of this. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Rohi Das Gupta. I'm an anthropologist. I study Jewish identity, anthropology of Jewishness. Very fragmented identity, although right now coming from India, with fairly an international experience, and my background is rather interdisciplinary. I'm a Holocaust educator and an Israel Studies educator, and recently just finished my MA in Jewish education from the Hebrew University. My aim with doing this program is largely to develop a course on Israel, Holocaust, and anti-Semitism, the various debates that has gone in with a very contemporary focus. So thank you for the opportunity and looking forward to the discussions.
Okay, so we have some group of people, so welcome everybody. Oh, sorry. There are guests over there.
I would like to say, actually, if I may, bend your ears a minute. I'm here by chance, but nothing happens by chance. That's what Judaism is based on. I have just met a long-lost cousin, Rabbi Zweig, and I didn't know of his existence even until I was walking yesterday in London, and a mutual cousin said, we have a cousin who's here from America, and he's in Oxford. And I said, I'm in Oxford tomorrow, and I've just been running a workshop, I'm an educational leader, and I think I needed to be here. I'm actually executive director of an organisation called NAJOS, which is National Association of Jewish Orthodox Schools, and I am at the forefront of actually keeping at bay, I think we would call it secondary anti-Semitism, because I'm responsible to make sure that there is no legislation passed that makes it very difficult for Jewish schools to be able to run within their ethos as long as we prepare children for modern Britain. And my ears prick up when I hear you are considering curriculum and writing curriculum. I'm sure that I will be back, or certainly be consulting you. So thank you very much.
Okay, so welcome everybody. It's a wonderful group of people. Thank you for coming here from far and wide. I just want to point out that Rabbi Brackman is here. Thank you for being here. He could also be of help to any people who are Jewish, want to go to synagogue, have needs of kashrut. If anybody's interested in having, I think, a wonderful Friday night dinner, the Chabad House is here in Oxford. It's an amazing place to be. If it's okay to say that, it's an amazing open place. So if anybody's interested, Friday nights at Chabad House is wonderful. I also want to point out that Phyllis Ferguson, who's an old friend, who when I arrived in Oxford in the 80s, she was running African Studies at St. Anthony's. So it's wonderful that you're here, and she's kindly offered to be of help. And I think tomorrow you'll speak about the possible programs over the weekend and other other issues that are happening around Oxford. So, Phyllis, thank you. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker. And before I introduce our speaker, which I'm honored that Rabbi Zweig is here, and his son, and his bodyguard. I just want to say what we're trying to do this year, and I think it's very important, is that there are Jewish intellectuals in the academy, in the university, but we are all trained to in a particular worldview. We have debate, discussion, discourse around kind of the founding fathers or the founding principles of our subject matter. If you go back to sort of Western Enlightenment philosophy, of sociology, of Marx, of Hegel, etc., etc. So we're kind of rooted in a specific worldview, despite our differences. And I think it's very important for us to take a moment and see things not just from kind of a Western European perspective or the academic perspective, but to really look at it from another perspective, another narrative, as speaking in our language. And to look at these issues from a Jewish perspective. And when I say a Jewish perspective, what I'm saying is a perspective that is sort of rooted in Jewish teachings in the Torah and Jewish principles. Not necessarily from a Jewish intellectual like myself who went to good universities and have sort of mastered a certain way of thinking, but it's different. And I would like to sort of mention, as a child, I was very fortunate to grow up in a home where my parents ensured that I would have at least an understanding of two perspectives. And I was educated by a very respected Rabbi, Daniel Munn, from the Bells community in Montreal, and I also ended up going to, in Montreal, it was a Protestant school. The Protestant schools were English and the Catholic schools were French, so I went to a Protestant school and went on to have a sort of a strong secular education, but I was aware and learned for many years with Rabbi Munn. And I think it's very important that we take these issues, including anti-Semitism, and what it means from a Torah perspective. So it's a great honor that Rabbi Akiva Zweig came from Miami to be with us. Actually, I've been spending time in Miami, and Rabbi Zweig, I've had the privilege of learning with him. And another colleague who will be here later next week, David Kresge, will be here. And then we've had the great honor of learning with Akiva, and it's really made my experience and my time in Miami much more better and richer than I imagined it would be. So I'm really grateful that you're here. So Rabbi Zweig studied and lectured for over 30 years in the Talmudic College of Florida, Miami Beach. He also studied for several years in Ner Israel Rabbinical College in Baltimore, in Maryland, and several years in yeshivas in Israel. He's also served as the rabbi of several Florida synagogues in both the Ashkenazi and Sephardic tradition. Rabbi Zweig graduated from the Talmudic University of Florida with a master's degree in Talmudic law, and then continued on in the faculty and teaching in the high school and as well as the university in both the undergraduate and graduate programs. He lectures at the highest levels on scripture, Talmudic law, Jewish history, philosophy, and Jewish ethics. Currently, Rabbi Zweig is the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva at the Talmudic College in Florida. He teaches on a variety of weekly and daily classes, including Talmud, the Jewish perspective, Jewish philosophy, prayer, and Jewish ethics. He oversees the staff and the development of young Jewish college students academically and also I think on a personal level as well. So he's lectured extensively in a wide range of Jewish subjects around the world and does workshops and does programs for different Jewish holidays and is a very sort of accessible and leading scholar in the Miami area. So, and rabbi. So it's really, Akiva, Rabbi Zweig, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Probably not. probably not our usual definition of a small world, but it's truly a Charles Small world, and exciting to meet so many people from all over the world. I only wish I was staying longer. Our university in Miami Beach is actually coming to a close for the semester in a couple of days, and I need to run back for that, and next year maybe we can plan it there. In general, I do not speak from notes or sheets, but tonight I wanted to do that simply because there is a lot to discuss, and I want to make sure I cover all the points as succinctly as possible. I understand we'll be having question and answer after, so if you feel like throwing things or anything in the middle, you can just wait till the end. So it's really my honor to be addressing all of you this evening. In Judaism, we have an important rabbinic custom to open any public address by giving respect and homage to the location as well as the host of the event. This evening, I want to acknowledge the importance and prestige of Oxford University, and specifically St. John's College, which is prominent under the Oxford umbrella. Many of you, as many of us, I should say, are aware of the illustrious history of the University of Oxford. The university started well over 900 years ago, and is in fact the second oldest college still in operation in the world. And it operates the oldest university museum and the largest university press in the world. I was fascinated to learn that the motto of the University of Oxford, anybody know? Is Dominus Illuminatio Mea, or the Lord is my light. Certainly, a credo such as the Lord is my light is not only a mantra but a vision statement as well as a mission statement. Interestingly, I believe that this motto is very relevant to our discussion tonight as anti-Semitism and its deepest origins. Perhaps because education is in my blood, as well as my lifelong ambition, I am biased as to the importance of education to humanity. My father, Rabbi Zweig, founded a university in Miami Beach, Florida, and he is known throughout the world as a rabbinic and Talmudic scholar and genius. It is not an exaggeration to rank my father as one of the greatest Jewish thinkers and Talmudists of the last several decades. Because I am his student, my father too is our host tonight. The organization that has brought all of us here tonight to explore this most important issue of anti-Semitism deserves our complete respect and attention. While the entire world is feeling the effects of terrorism, extremism, and abhorrent violence, almost no one is taking a proactive approach to this global devastation. ISGAP is leading the charge on the education of anti-Semitism and understanding its devastating effects on all humanity. My dear and brilliant friend, Dr. Charles Small, is a man of modest disposition and incredible knowledge and even greater perspective. Thank you, Dr. Small, and thank you all principals and members of ISGAP for inviting me here this evening to share a traditional Jewish Orthodox viewpoint on both the definition and origins of anti-Semitism. May God bless us all that our efforts here this week at Oxford University and next week here at St. John's College have a positive impact towards peaceful coexistence and harmonious relationships among all countries and peoples of the world. Well, hard to see, I apologize. If you look at the Oxford English Dictionary definition of Semite, you will find that a Semite is a member of any of a group of peoples who speak or spoke a Semitic language, including in particular Jews and Arabs. So the Semitic definition is any of a number of peoples. The Merriam-Webster dictionary specifically mentions any number of peoples of southwestern Asia. These include Akkadians, Phoenicians, Hebrews, and Arabs. Incredibly, if you look in the same Oxford Dictionary definition of anti-Semitism, you find that anti-Semitism refers specifically to hostility or discrimination against Jews as a religious, ethnic, or racial group to the exclusion of all others. How do we explain this phenomenon? On the one hand, a Semite is any member of many different peoples, and on the other hand, being an anti-Semite is having specifically an anti-Jewish agenda. I would like to call everyone's attention to one etymological piece of information, also courtesy of the Oxford English Dictionary. It's actually back here. Under origin is where it's stated. The dictionary says that the origin of the word Semite is based on a biblical character who was a son of Noah. This man Noah is famous for having survived a flood that covered the entire world on an ark that God instructed him to build. The Bible records that one of the 3 sons with whom Noah journeyed on the ark was named Shem. That's how we say it in Hebrew, Shem. The basis of this word Semite is the son who was called Shem, a Semite, a Shemite. That's right there in the bottom of the Oxford English Dictionary, and in fact, if you look at the Oxford Etymological Dictionary or the Bible Dictionary, you'll find that they bring the same origin. So we now know that the word Semite derives from the Hebrew name Shem, who was a son of Noah. I would now like to share with you some classical biblical teachings and expositions in traditional Jewish thinking. These pieces of information are based on the 5 books of Moses and have been in existence for over 3 millenniums. This is a quote from Scripture in Genesis. Firstly, the man named Shem, this son of Noah, is the ancestor of all the Semitic nations. These include what today are the Jews, the Islamic people, and quite possibly large numbers of Christians as well. Certainly, the thinking of all these Semitic peoples and their respective religions share the powerful influence of the Abrahamic tradition, who was himself a descendant of Shem. According to all classic Jewish literature, this man Shem established the first known university. It was titled simply the Yeshiva of Shem, or the University of Shem. Further, it is recorded in ancient Jewish texts that some of the students who studied in this university included many peoples of the world, among them Abraham himself and several of his descendants. This is one of the quotes of one of the texts where you can see some of the descendants who studied it. So what was taught and studied in this first ancient university? The answer is the universal laws of mankind and society. These laws were given by God directly to the first man Adam and later to Noah. These laws describe the basic parameters of a society that recognizes the one God as the creator of the universe and the king of all mankind. This is a quote of the laws of Noah, the Noahide laws, from the Babylonian Talmud, and it can also be traced in Scripture. In brief, these laws ban the worship of idols, promote morality, as well as the adjudication of civil laws and rights, including the prohibited acts of murder, stealing, and adultery. In Judaism, these laws are known simply as the Noahide laws. These are called the Noahide laws because after the deluge, Noah and all his descendants were instructed by God as to their observance. A centerpiece of these laws is the concept that all mankind is created in God's image. And that's a quote from Scripture. I didn't have the time to put it in the slides, but that's a quote from Scripture, that all mankind is created in God's image. This means that there is a reflection of God that is innate to every human being, and that every human being has godly value. It is because of this godliness that murder is abhorrent. It is this godliness that uniquely dignifies all humanity. What I wish to highlight about these laws of morality and adjudication is the following. According to Judaism and Jewish law and thinking, these laws are universal. Every single human being is subject to these same rules and ethics. That's them up there. Moreover, these are the only universal laws. This concept, that these are the only rules, cannot be overemphasized. This exclusivity necessarily means that the only requirement by God to live a God authentic, and God-condoned existence is to abide by this set of rules. The significance of this uniquely Jewish teaching is that all human beings have these same regulations, and all human beings are subjects of this one God, and all human beings are in God's image. If you'll permit me, I'm just going to repeat that again. The significance of this unique Jewish teaching is that all human beings have the same regulations, and all human beings are subjects of this one God, and all human beings are in God's image. Perforce, all human beings must recognize each other's right of existence, and all must serve this same God. The genuine Jewish view of all humanity is that no human being has the right to thrust any rule or dictum on any other human being except for these laws. This means that the entirety of humanity should have global views of complete tolerance for each other and respect for each other, except in violation of these Noahide laws. Under this definition, it would be illegal to kill or discriminate against anyone for race, color, or culture, because the only guidelines are these rules. I suggest to all of us sitting here that this man, Shem, the son of Noah, the original Semite, saw it as his mission to universally promulgate these laws. Because he understood that the flooding of the world was due to man's pervasive corruption, he felt impassioned to prevent the decay of future societies. Shem, the Semite, therefore established this first university as a means of educating the entire world as to the existence of God and the application of these universal laws. Indeed, the word university itself is derived from the word universe. The Oxford English Dictionary says that the Latin root of university means the whole, or society. This, of course, tells us that the role of university is to educate the whole society as to ways of thinking and paradigms, which of course explains why what we're all doing in this room is so important. The world gets affected by what is taught in university. The result of all the above is that a Semite is a person who lives by and teaches these universal laws, ethics of morality, as well as a paradigm of monotheism. The Semite focuses on the godliness of every human being and the inherent respect due every person. Therefore, anti-Semite or anti-Semitism is anything that contradicts or attacks these teachings. Let's explain this on a practical level. A Semite worldview is where all people reflect godliness, have a right to exist, have a right to have a relationship with God, and a system whereby these rights are protected. Furthermore, the adherence to these universal laws and ethics is the basis of all societal behavior and will bring whatever present reward or long-term future existence that God will provide. Whether or not this current world lasts forever and whatever comes next, the whole of existence is meant for all people. According to the Semite, there is no special club or exclusivity that denies membership. The only requirement are these Noahide rules. This world is meant for every human, and any future existence or experience is meant for every human. To my knowledge, the only well-known and identifiable group that teaches this authentic Semitic view is the Jews. It is for this reason that anti-Semitism came to be defined as an exclusive antipathy against the Jews only. The Jews are the ones that teach that these are the only universal rules. What I mean by this is that the primary objection to the Semite is that the Semite does not agree that a relationship with God is exclusive. A Semite does not think that only one race or one type of person is superior, or that one type of person has godliness and is supposed to control others or dominate the world. An anti-Semite does subscribe to the notion that only one type of person, race, or religion is superior. Only one type of person has godliness and therefore will have a relationship with God. An anti-Semite does think that one type of person or race or one religion should, yes, dominate the world. And if you'll permit me, I'll just repeat that. An anti-Semite does subscribe to the notion that only one type of person or religion is superior. Only one type of person has godliness and therefore will have a relationship with God. An anti-Semite does think that one type of person, or one race, or one religion should, yes, dominate the world. Therefore, a root cause of anti-Semitism is resentment and hatred of the universal ideas espoused in Jewish educational thinking. The whole notion of caring for everyone equally, and every person has a right to exist, is an incredibly Jewish concept. As an aside, this is the fundamental reason that Jews do not seek to proselytize. There is no Jewish notion that the Jews need to save other humans. This is simply because all humanity can and should have their own unique relationship with God under the very broad umbrella of the universal Noahide laws. Jews do not need to proselytize because there is no need to save others with Judaism. Judaism does not promote a mission to impose Judaism on humanity. As we all know from thousands of years of history of wars and suffering and violence among humans, so much is caused by notions of exclusivity, salvation, and superiority. Whether we look back to wars of religious versus pagan, or religious versus religious, or wars of global conquests, or the world wars, we almost always find notions of imposing exclusivity on a relationship with God, or superiority of race, or simply global domination. I contend that all of this is anti-Semitism. The Semite teaches respect for all men and their rights to exist, and for each person to have their own unique relationship with God under the very broad umbrella of the Noahide principles. One more time on that paragraph. Whether we look back to wars of religious versus pagan, or religious versus religious, or wars of global conquests, or the world war, we almost always find notions of imposing exclusivity on a relationship with God, or superiority of race, or global domination. I contend that all of this is anti-Semitism. The Semite teaches respect for all men and their rights to exist, and for each person to have their own unique relationship with God under the very broad umbrella of the Noahide principles. As we mentioned earlier, the word Semite derives from the name Shem, who was the son of Noah. Interestingly, this word Shem actually translates to mean name. In other words, this man Shem was named name. In Judaism, a common way to refer to God is Ha-Shem. Ha-Shem. This translates to the name. This is seen as the most respectful of the informal ways to refer to God. I believe that the reason that this son of Noah was called Shem is because it was his mission to publicize the name of God. He established the first university whose purpose was to teach the universal Noahide laws and to educate the entire world as to the fact of God's existence and his name. One last fascinating fact about this man named Shem, the original Semite. Scripture tells us that Shem eventually became the king of Jerusalem and a minister to God. In light of our understanding, this is no mere coincidence. In Judaism, Jerusalem is the city of God's presence. Even today, people from all over the world travel to Jerusalem to connect with spirituality and holiness. It makes perfect sense that the man who sought to educate the universe as to God's existence and name would be the king of this city and a minister to God. As I stated at the beginning of this address, the University of Oxford motto is Dominus Illuminatio Mea, or the Lord is my light. By stating that there is a God, and by recognizing that God gives guidance, the University of Oxford has shaped itself in true Semitic fashion. The Lord is my light, by the way, is a quote from Psalms chapter 27. King David wrote that a couple thousand years ago. So, again, the motto is Dominus Illuminatio Mea, or the Lord is my light. This motto is a shining example of an authentic Semitic teaching. By stating that there is a God, and by recognizing that God gives guidance, the University of Oxford has shaped itself in true Semitic fashion. Not only is the teaching Semitic, but it is being promulgated by a university. This is true Semitic tradition. It is no wonder that the University of Oxford has succeeded so well for nearly 1,000 years. Surely God is blessing this university and helping it achieve its global impact. May God, or as we say in Judaism, may Hashem, bless us all to recognize and observe these universal Noachide laws and learn to respect the godliness in every human being. In this way we will certainly find tolerance, peace, and harmony for humanity and spiritual uplifting and fulfillment in a relationship with His great name.
We have time for Q&A, so...
Was that easy?
If one walked into this talk naively, not knowing a lot, one would say that actually your talk is the antithesis to the usual narrative of Judaism as a religion of the chosen people.
That's correct.
So I wonder if you could address that.
Sure. So, is it Professor?
It's Larry. It's
Laser Wolf. Professor Laser Wolf is asking that how do we kind of mesh the two ideas of the Jews as the chosen people and the idea that the Jews, in my presentation, are espousing the notion of universality and that there is no exclusivity. So very simply, I would say that the contradiction, so to speak, would be resolved, that the Jews have undertaken the responsibility to spread the message of universality. When they do, they are living up to their mission, and when they do not, either by their teachings or their misbehaviors, then they are actually shirking their responsibility, God-given responsibility, to teach this universal message.
May I follow up?
Please.
Because I wonder if you could address it, in the context of the talk that you gave, and that is because this notion of chosenness has actually been one of the root causes of anti-Semitism. It's been pointed to as a kind of a Jewish elitism. I think it's been one of the turning points around which anti-Semitism lives. Would you agree and maybe comment?
There's definitely a catchphrase that the Jews, being the chosen people, either have or feel a certain entitlement of superiority. This is a great misunderstanding of authentic Judaism, A, as we're explaining in the paper, the true Semite tradition, and B, a misunderstanding that the role of the Jew is that of responsibility and not privilege. The role of the Jew is a responsibility to help bring this light, not to proselytize, but simply to make people aware as to the existence of God and these universal laws. There's zero mission, zero commandment, if you will, to actually proselytize.
So I have a question. From a Jewish perspective, how do you deal with worldviews, religions, ideologies that say there is inferior and superior people, or in order to be close to God, you must do this and you must believe that, which are different than the Noahide laws? How do you, from a Jewish perspective, deal with, confront, maybe even fight against it?
That's an excellent question. Aside from attending these seminars and giving the dissertation, well, firstly, is that there is a great misunderstanding about the Jewish way of thinking. This is really, really a critical thing. I would contend that perhaps other religions do have notions of exclusivity on things like salvation and redemption, the world to come, the ever after, however you want to refer to it, in a sort of response to the misunderstanding about Judaism. As we know, Judaism predated the major religions. And what's misunderstood is that Judaism is of the very firm understanding and belief that all people will have a share in the infinite, whatever that infinite is, as long as these rules are observed. So I think that part of the answer to your question is to debunk the notion that Jews believe that about themselves or that about other people. In other words, Jews do not believe that a person needs to be a Jew of the Jewish faith any of the commandments that Jews choose to follow, are obligated to follow, that does not apply to other people, and that does not affect their having an infinite existence. So the first thing is to debunk that notion. The second thing is really to kind of try to engage people on the scripture that says all men are created in God's image. So how do we reckon all men being created in God's image with the notion that not all men have infinite godly value? Now, what's really the response from other religions? And I think that's an important question. And I think in general, in discourse, the best weapon is a question. I think, do you agree? Yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
Regarding this issue of the misconception of chosen people that has many thousands of years, and considering also that God decides everything, did the Jewish people chose to be the one responsible for this mission, or was really a divine concept? Am I clear with the question?
Yeah,
because
I
think that they became a nation when they left Egypt, right? After many years of being slaves. So, if the word chosen, or the verb to choose is playing a role there, it's not that people decided to really be the one carrying on the responsibility of taking care of other human beings?
So your question, if I understand it, is did Jews really choose this undertaking of being responsible?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. And yes, to both your points, as it is in most things in Judaism. God chose the Jewish people and the people chose God. They were given a very clear choice, and they asked to engage in this covenant with God and undertake this responsibility. In Scripture, it's called a kingdom of ministers. And a minister, by the way, the correct translation of the Hebrew word kohen, if anybody is familiar, is a servant. It's one who serves. So you could say that Jews are serving at the pleasure of God. Yes.
Rabbi, thank you. When we met yesterday, I knew I wanted to be front and center at your talk, and I'm not disappointed. I'm just so gratified by what I heard. Can you talk just a little bit about paradox? Because there is something very beautiful in the paradox, as it were, of being chosen. And I may be wrong, I'm just thinking aloud, so bear with me. But there's something beautiful about the idea of being chosen to tell the world that no one is chosen. Could you speak on paradox for that?
That's an excellent point. You can sense the emotion. And it really is an emotional issue. So this is actually a quote from Zechariah, as we say in Judaism. And it's something that many Jews pray 3 times a day. It's the conclusion of one of our main prayers. And it says, "And the Lord God shall become king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be named one, and his name one." There you go with the word name again. And that's really a vision statement for Judaism, that the goal is that the entire world should recognize this godliness. And is there a paradox in the fact that only one people are chosen to bear that responsibility, that nobody is chosen? Yes and no. It's kind of like, you know, how often in a family you find that one person takes responsibility for the success of the rest of the family, whether it be one of the parents or one of the children. And a person who takes that responsibility, it's a huge, huge undertaking, and it makes them special in a way, but they only succeed if everyone succeeds. And that's really the truth. And it is an awesome responsibility, and that does get into another whole notion of anti-Semitism, that anti-Semitism rears its ugly head against the Jews when they're not fulfilling this responsibility. That is another notion of anti-Semitism. And many, many Jews would espouse that belief. I'm not here to discuss that particular slant tonight, but that's the paradox of which you're speaking. That, you know, being responsible like that does edify you as a human being to live a life of service, as people of service know. At the same time, you're not successful if everyone else is not succeeding.
What is the root word of responsibility of Hebrew?
That's an interesting,
Can you repeat the question, please?
I'm sorry, yes. What is the root word of responsibility? In the Talmudic parlance, the word is achrayut. Achrayut means responsibility. It's kind of like the one who has to clean up after everyone else. It comes from the word achar, which means afterwards. There's other words of responsibility which gets us into a very different discussion I'm sure we would like to talk about. Because in Judaism, there's a misconception of a certain word that means guilt. It's translated normally as guilt, but the correct translation is responsibility. And believe it or not, it's a derivative of this word because it's Ashem, Asham, or Ashem. Where the word Ashem probably comes from is that word itself, ashamed. A sense of shame is when a person knows that they're living below their standard of self-responsibility. Yeah, that's probably the right Hebrew word. Question?
Yes, well, I'm very interested and impressed with the way in which you decided to say anti-Semitism to rejection universality. It reminds me of a very bad novel by George Steiner called Portage, or something like that, where it's a terrible novel. Hitler survives, he goes to Argentina, he's eventually brought to trial. His defense of his actions are, I was trying to free the world from the universality, from the obligation of monotheism. And in fact, I've encountered from some of my colleagues even, this idea that Judaism is ultimately responsible for monotheism, and therefore from a kind of polytheistic, from that perspective, a more tolerant polytheistic critique, that Judaism gives to the world this negative obligation, this negative concept of monotheism. So this is not something I subscribe to, but this is a sort of possible challenge to this idea of monotheism as a rejection of specialness. And maybe polytheists or some religions will say that possibly even anti-Semitism could be the result or grow out of a rejection of the idea of one God.
So you're saying that perhaps anti-Semitism is specifically targeted at rejecting the concept of one God?
Yes.
Yeah, so am I. Totally agree. Now, I don't need to focus on the one God aspect. I much more would rather focus on the rejection of other people because of that rejection. If you devalue the concept of monotheism, you immediately open the Pandora's box of saying, well, not all people are necessarily of the same value. And that's a huge problem. So you could focus on the monotheism, and that's certainly an aspect, and that's why Abraham, who was a descendant of Shem and the Semitic people and all the religions that come from that, do speak of a monotheism type religion. But the truth is that, yeah, undermining that is a big, big problem, because basically it says anything goes.
But what about the universalistic anti-Semitism against Israel? You have a lot of people who say Israel is an anachronistic, nationalistic, particularistic ideology based on Zionism, nationalism. Israel wants to be like a nation among other nations. So there is another way of addressing the Jews and Israel. So how does this affect
Let me understand your question better.
I mean, you have a lot of universalistic anti-Semitism. This means anti-Zionism, you say that this is an ideology of nationalism and not universalistic. And so this is another way of attacking the Jews. And so how can you deal with it?
You know, again, it's a very important question. How do we debunk any misperception? And that's truly one of the difficult tasks in the world today. You wonder when you're reading the news if you're reading a misperception or if you're reading facts. It's a very difficult thing to do, which is why being in this room is very important. Being at the forefront of academia and really discussing these issues at a high level. It's a complete myth that Zionism is the source of anything. You know, everything that we read here tonight, straight out of the same Bible that talks about the land of Israel and everything else. It's the same Bible that speaks of this universality that I brought you quotes for, and can bring you many more if anybody wants and has the time and the patience. So the fact that Zionism is somehow seen as the exclusivity, the better than anything else, is really a myth. Now, do we Jews bear responsibility for some of this misperception? 100%. No question about it. Again, whether it's in the way we speak or in the way that we act, we do have significant responsibility for those misperceptions. We do. But if you go back to the authentic sources, you see very clearly what we're discussing. It's really not a truth that's espoused in the Bible.
I just want to pick up on the question because I'm not.
Go ahead.
Translating is my
That would be awesome.
I think I think the question was about and nice to have an answer from you after this talk, is that Israel is perceived by many as very particularistic. They're the right of return for Jews, not for anyone else. So there's a real particularism that is used as a cudgel. And how would you respond to that?
Well, I don't think it's unfair that there are, is that more accurate to the question? Yes?
Yeah, I see. This is my point. They blame the Jews for being particularistic, not universalistic anymore. And this is another way of attacking the Jews right now.
Yeah, again, you know, does it make sense for Jews to have a homeland? Does it make sense for any people to have a homeland? You know, so if the answer to that is yes, so then the only question becomes, why is Israel being seen differently than that? And I think it does go back again to what we've been talking about, which is a misunderstanding of the universality of the message of the Jew. I do think that that's what it's about. Another question? Very good? Yes.
My question is about the role of education in Jewish religion. I always thought that education is the top priority for Jewish religion and Jewish families because they were discriminated so many times, so many places. They did not have much of a choice but to educate themselves because that was the only way to manage. But am I correct to understand that it's a religious, there are religious foundations behind this, but you, Rabbi, just described that it's a mission. That's why they should educate themselves.
Yes, you are correct. In fact, the role of education in Judaism is very clearly spelled out in our daily prayers. It's not so much that it's a religious obligation as much as it is a foundation of all Judaism. So, for example, there's another prayer that we say that God is one. Shortly after that it says you need to teach that to your children wherever you go, wherever you walk, wherever you are. So it's part of education, it's part of daily life. Education in Judaism is not a response to disadvantage or anti-Semitism. Education is part and parcel of our responsibility. Daily life. They're 100% correct in that.
Thank you.
Semitic. Yes.
You may have just spoken to this, but you talked about the need to debunk misunderstandings that have led to anti-Semitism. Would you maybe talk a little bit about systemic ways to do that kind of debunking?
This is a mystery that we're all grappling with. I think Dr. Small was doing tremendously at that. I guess we all have to think about what are the ways that we can properly educate. One of the great quotes that I like about education is that leading by example is not one way to educate, it's the only way. And part and parcel of education has to be an integration of what you teach into who you are. And it might sound like I'm sidestepping the issue, but really I've thought about it a lot, and I really think that these types of forums, other types of university forums, Probably there should be universities again, patterned after the Semite viewpoint of the universality of man, the godliness in every human being, the studying of these laws and their applications, morality and adjudication. Probably that would be a very worthwhile cause. And I think meeting people from all over the world and having discourse is really an awesome way to go. I don't know of a better way, especially because in the world in which we live, it's very difficult to get a soapbox, a platform, a microphone for our friend Charlton that people listen to. You know, everybody's normally shouted down the minute that you speak something that's unpopular, anti, you know, the modern day agendas. Good?
Anybody else?
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.